This is New Zealand. It is, by almost every objective measure, one of the most breathtaking places on the entire planet. Its jagged, snow-capped mountains look like high-resolution CG. Its turquoise lakes look like they've been hit with a permanent Instagram filter. The scenery is so cinematic and so perfect that the entire country often feels less like a real place and more like an abandoned movie set from The Lord of the Rings. But behind this postcard-perfect facade, something strange is happening. Something that doesn't make sense for a country consistently ranked at the top of global happiness and livability indices. People are leaving. And we aren't talking about tourists catching their flights home. We are talking about actual New Zealanders, the people born and raised in this dream country, packing their entire lives into suitcases and boarding one-way flights to Australia. This isn't a slow trickle, it's a mass exodus. For a wealthy, stable, first-world nation, the numbers are nothing short of shocking. New Zealand isn't collapsing under the weight of a war. It isn't a dictatorship. It isn't a failed state. It has clean streets, world-class schools, a stable government, and a quality of life that billions of people would die for. So, the question is simple. How did a country that looks like paradise become a place that its own citizens can't wait to escape? To answer that, we have to look at the one thing most people ignore when they think about New Zealand: its brutal geography. The tyranny of distance. New Zealand is one of the most geographically isolated nations on Earth. Tucked away in the South Pacific, it sits thousands of miles away from the world's major population centers. If you live in Europe, the Middle East, or the Americas, New Zealand is so far away it barely feels real. It feels like a bonus map in a video game that you only unlock at the very end. This distance is exactly why New Zealand feels so special. It's quiet, it's protected, and it feels insulated from the chaos of the rest of the world. But that same distance is also its greatest economic curse. In the modern world, distance is expensive. New Zealand has a population of roughly 5.3 million people. To put that into perspective, that is roughly the same population as just the city of Sydney, Australia. New Zealand is an entire country with the consumer base of a single international city. This matters immensely because modern economies thrive on scale. A large population means a massive workforce, diverse consumer markets, specialized industries, and endless niches for career growth. A small, isolated population means fewer companies, fewer jobs, and a glass ceiling that you hit very early in your career. When you combine that small scale with the fact that New Zealand is thousands of miles away from global supply chains, you realize why certain industries simply cannot survive there. Most of the world's trade flows through the Northern Hemisphere, between Asia, Europe, and North America. For a company to set up a massive manufacturing hub in New Zealand, the shipping costs alone would be a suicide mission. The two pillars, cows and concrete. Because it can't compete in global manufacturing or high-tech hardware, New Zealand's economy has been forced to lean on two very specific pillars: agriculture and real estate. One of these pillars is incredibly productive, but it doesn't need many workers. The other provides plenty of jobs, but it has created a dangerous financial trap for the youth. Let's start with agriculture. New Zealand is an agricultural powerhouse. For a developed nation, this is actually quite rare. Usually, as countries get richer, they shift entirely into finance, tech, and services. But New Zealand never fully walked away from the farm. Why? Because the land is too good. The climate is perfect, the water is abundant, and it has a seasonal advantage. Being in the Southern Hemisphere means New Zealand can produce off-season food for the North. When it's winter in Europe or North America and nothing is growing, New Zealand is harvesting. They export massive amounts of dairy, meat, and fruit to Asia. But here is the catch. Modern farming is highly mechanized. Farmers today invest in automation and high-end systems rather than a massive manual workforce. So, while agriculture is a massive export engine, it isn't a career engine for a college-educated young professional in Auckland. So, if you aren't a farmer, what's left? That brings us to the second pillar, housing. In New Zealand, a house isn't just a place to live, it is the primary engine of the economy. Buying, selling, building, renting, and financing real estate makes up a disproportionate amount of the country's economic activity. And when a country treats housing as a financial instrument rather than a basic necessity, things get ugly. Prices stop reflecting local salaries and start reflecting global investment capital. There is a deep-seated belief in New Zealand that house prices only go up. This has resulted in some of the most unaffordable real estate in the world. It's a paradox. You look out the window and see endless open space, yet a basic home in a major city costs a fortune. Why? Because materials have to be imported, the labor force is small, and regulations are tight. For a young New Zealander, home ownership has shifted from a milestone to a fantasy. They look at the math and realize they will be renting forever. The Australia factor, the first world brain drain. This is where the escape route comes in. If New Zealand is too expensive and the jobs are too limited, where do you go? The answer is just 3 hours away across the Tasman Sea, Australia. Now, you might argue that Sydney and Melbourne are also expensive. They are. But the difference isn't the cost of living, it's the opportunity. New Zealand is a lifestyle country, but it isn't a build country. If you want to work in big tech, there is no Silicon Valley in Auckland. If you want to be a titan of global finance, Auckland isn't Singapore or London. If you want to be at the cutting edge of specialized research, the budgets just aren't there. You hit a ceiling, and you hit it fast. Australia is essentially New Zealand's bigger brother. It has a similar culture, the same language, and the same love for rugby. But it has more of everything else. More companies, more capital, more industries, and significantly higher salaries. This creates a phenomenon rarely seen in the developed world, a first world brain drain. Usually, brain drain happens when people flee war-torn or developing nations for the West. But New Zealand is already the West. It is losing its best and brightest not to a different civilization, but to a bigger version of itself. The legal relationship between the two countries makes this transition frictionless. A New Zealander can move to Australia with almost no paperwork. They don't need to learn a new language or adapt to a new culture. They just show up, get a 30% pay raise, and start their lives. When the exit door is this easy to walk through, people use it. The stepping stone trap. To fix the labor shortage caused by locals leaving, the New Zealand government does the logical thing: they increase immigration. They bring in skilled workers from Asia, Africa, and Europe to fill the gaps in hospitals, construction sites, and offices. But here is the stepping stone problem. Many of these immigrants see New Zealand the same way the locals do. They arrive, get their residency, gain some experience, and then realize they can earn way more money in Australia. New Zealand ends up doing the hard work of vetting and settling these migrants, only for Australia to poach them a few years later. Meanwhile, there is an influx of people moving to New Zealand, but they aren't young workers. They are wealthy, retired Australians or high net worth individuals from around the world looking for a bolt hole or a vacation home. They buy up property in places like Queenstown or Wanaka, pushing prices even higher for the locals. They aren't there to build the economy. They are there to consume the scenery. A beautiful museum? So, why hasn't New Zealand fixed this? Because you can't fix geography. New Zealand cannot magically move itself closer to Europe. It cannot suddenly create a domestic market of 50 million people. And it cannot easily compete with Australia's massive mineral wealth. Australia sits on mountains of iron ore, coal, and gas that fund its high salaries. New Zealand doesn't have that cheat code. New Zealand is stuck in a cycle. If it raises salaries to keep people, the cost of doing business goes up. If the cost of business goes up, the cost of living follows. If the cost of living rises, the young people leave even faster. The bitter truth is that New Zealand is arguably the best country in the world to live in if you have already made it. If you have a career, if you own property, or if you are looking to retire in peace, it is paradise. But if you are 22 years old, ambitious, and trying to build a life from scratch, New Zealand feels like a room with no windows. New Zealand isn't going to collapse tomorrow. It isn't doomed. But it is facing a slow, quiet hollow out. When a country loses its most ambitious generation, it doesn't die instantly, it just loses its momentum. It stops being a place where the future is built and starts being a place where the past is preserved. If this trend continues, New Zealand risks becoming exactly what many fear: a beautiful museum. A luxury waiting room, a country that looks like a dream on a postcard, but functions only as an expensive retirement destination for the global elite. The mountains will always be there, and the lakes will always be blue. But if there are no young people left to enjoy them, what kind of country is left? Speaking of the future, do you think New Zealand can actually pivot its economy to keep its youth? Or is the pull of Australia just too strong? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to see more deep dives into the hidden economics of the world's most interesting places, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.